Hi everyone, Mr. Ritter here, just kind of hanging out home. Thought I'd make a video about Scratch, what we did the first 2 days of class, both A and B days, 7th and 8th grade. If you weren't there, we'll be working with Scratch, which is behind me here, and this is the interface, the 1.4 version on the MIT website. Well, Scratch is developed by MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and their website is right here, scratch.mit.edu, and there's tons of resources here for you to learn how to use Scratch, which is a programming interface that kind of works like stacking Legos. On the Scratch website there is the 2.0 version of Scratch, which is right here, and there's a step-by-step intro into it, lots of different tutorials. Unfortunately, this, for our classroom environment, takes up a lot of bandwidth, so we will be using the desktop download, the free desktop download version of Scratch, which is version 1.4. In class we talked about the graphical user interface here, which was discussed in a presentation which you can view on the classroom website, and you should have that information in your syllabus. And anyway, the current objectives that we covered in class were X and Y movement of the sprite here, and we talked about changing the color of the sprite. We talked about changing the background here on the stage, and then we also talked about how to work with sound. In regards to XY movement, the sprite's location is determined by a Cartesian coordinate system. So there's a graph, and its origin is pretty much right here. It's 0, 0. And so we have an x-axis and a y-axis, and we can locate or change the position of our sprites based upon the location within the Cartesian coordinate system. So anyway, we're dealing with motion. So we're just going to get started here. And based upon the x-axis, this block right here, this move 10 steps here. If you're not on the motion blocks, it should be all blue. You should click on motion. And so generally the program opens up, defaults to motion. Not sure why, but there we have it. If I click on this block, I discover that the sprite moves to the right 10 steps. If I change the value in here to -10, and then I click on this block, it moves to the left. Next, I'd like to change the position of our sprite in regards to the y-axis. So if I click on the change y by 10, it moves up 10. If I change this to -10, it should move down, and there it goes. Well, that's great, but we want to create a program where a user would control the sprite using control keys, such as the arrow, up arrow, down arrow, left arrow, etc. So what I want to do is go to the control button here in the palette, and that gives me all the control blocks. And what I'm interested in is right here, when space key pressed. So I'm going to move that out into the script area here. And so what this says is that it listens for when the space key is pressed. But we're not looking for the space key, and I notice that there's an arrow here. And when I press that arrow, I get a drop-down menu. And within that drop-down menu, I'm going to select the down arrow. So I have here change y by -10, so I'm going to slide that up there, click them together. Let's get this out of the way. So now when I use my arrow key, it should move, down arrow key, it should move down. And there it goes. Now I can go in here and drag out another when key pressed block and go into motion and drag out another change y by value block. But I don't want to do that. I just want to go in here, right click on this script and duplicate, and then change the values in here. So when up arrow, and then change that by 10. Alright, so now pressing the up, pressing the down, super, we have two directions taken care of. Next I'm going to drag out this block here again, and I want to change it to the right arrow. Now, I want to go back to motion here, because in class some students were confused by these two blocks, so I just pulled this out of here. I just pulled the change x by a value block and then move a certain value that many steps. And so there was some confusion about, well, which one should I use? What's the difference? Essentially, in this type of program that we're doing, it's very simplistic. They're basically the same. Later on, there's some subtle nuances of which we will get into later on between the two. But for now, I'm going to put that one back, and I'm going to take this one because we want to kind of use the same convention here. We use a change y by and change x by, and it's a little bit more specific about what we're doing. So now I have a change x by, but I have to change this right here to be the right arrow. Once I select that, I now have movement along the x-axis to the right using the arrow key. So now I'm going to duplicate this, put that there. I need to change the left arrow and then change that to -10, and now we have all the directions satisfied using the arrow keys. Okay, well, that's great, but I would rather have my cat look left when I hit the left arrow key. A lot of students were playing around with having it look up and look down, changing the orientation of the sprite to satisfy those conditions. I just want to work with left and right. And so I want to make sure that I press the right arrow key because I want it in the orientation that the costume is. Notice I have two costumes here. And so I have it as the original. I have my sprite aligned as the original costumes, and now I want to use some different blocks. But there's lots of ways to change this, I guess, as I think here. We could get in here and edit the costume, which if I press edit, that opens the paint editor, and I can change the orientation of my sprite. But I don't want to do that. Since I'm learning this program, I'd really like to learn the blocks, and so I want to go back into motion here, and then I want to use this block right here, point in direction. I notice that there is a drop-down menu here. There's an icon for the drop-down. I notice that 90 is right, -90 degrees is left, 0 is up, and 180 is down. So with the right arrow, I want to point right. So now I'm going to take another block here, and I want to change this to be negative. Okay, so let's test it out. So that one works fine, no big deal there. Whoa! Oh, wait a minute, that's not right. So something has to change. And so there's lots of ways to change that, but I'm kind of going to go the down and dirty quick way. Since I only want left and right motion anyway, make sure that I'm facing right here, and I'm going to go up here next to the cat up here in the top menu bar here, and there's a button here that says only face left and right. These are rotation buttons. The top one here says can rotate, this one here says only left and right, and this one here says stop rotation or don't rotate. But I want to select this one, only face left right. So I do that, and now if I press the left arrow key, everything's great. Okay, so now that I have the XY movement taken care of, I notice that in my costumes here, I have two different costumes for this particular sprite, and it kind of looks like I can make him run, or her run, or whatever gender it is. But anyway, since I'm dealing with a costume, I'm dealing with the look of a costume. And so I want to go in here to the looks, press the looks button, which reveals all of these different blocks regarding the look of my sprite. Now, there's lots of ways to flip from the first costume to the second costume. So notice if I press this block, I guess it won't do it from there. And it won't do it. It should work when you press it, but whatever. I could use the switch to costume, but I really want to use a shortcut because I only have 2 costumes. What I want to do is create a loop where first there is costume 1 and then there's costume 2. Then it goes right away back to costume 1. So it gives me the appearance that I'm running. So I want to try this. Next costume. So what I'm saying here is that when the right arrow key is pressed, I want to go from the first costume directly to the next costume. I want to point in this direction, and I want to change X by 10 pixels. And so when I do that, awesome. I like that effect, so I'm going to do that to each one of my scripts. And so now I'm running, the cat is running in all directions. I like that. Alright, so we've taken care of XY movement and we have more motion going on, or it appears that we have more motion. Now I want to take care of color.